Welcome, busy gamers. Today we're going to be talking about Death's Door. What's good, what's bad, and that all-important question, is it worth your time? Now, if you have joined me for another worth your time video in the past, feel free to go ahead and skip to the section you're most interested in, as I've broken the chapters down for your convenience. Now let's get straight into that overview. Death's Door was released in July of 2021, and it's available on all the major platforms. The game was developed by a small two-man studio called Acid Nerve, and it was published by Devolver Digital. In this game, you take the role of a crow, you reap souls, and you punch that time card in a muted and grayscale world. What starts out as just another day of work quickly becomes a wild adventure across a varied and unique landscape. As your job, the collection of a large and unique soul is stolen out from under you. In this top-down dungeon explorer that strongly reminds me personally of the Zelda games of past, you'll meet a quirky cast of characters, all while uncovering suspicious activities and what we're going to go ahead and call morally gray decisions from your upper management. At the time of this review, I've played Death's Door for about 20 hours on PlayStation, as well as another 6 hours on PC. I've not completed all the achievements, but I've completed the main story, and I'm working on getting a few more shiny things for my collection off and on. So what is good about Death's Door? Let's start with the overall mood and the feeling of the game. It's quirky for sure. It manages to combine a dark and washed out world that tends towards the depressing and the outright silly. From the commentary it makes on the value of a life, of a soul, and just what someone or something is willing to do to live forever, to a gravedigger who delivers beautiful eulogies while desiring deeply to be able to die himself, there's a lot to unpack on the serious side, but the game always maintains its light as well. It's got a source of silly and irreverent happiness, starting with Pothead, the noble grandson, and a minion of a frog who just wants some individuality and to be himself. All of these things kind of combine to make me really invested and involved in the world of the game. And I'm pretty happy to actually interact with and talk to the characters I meet along my path, instead of what in most games just becomes running by or at best clicking through what I felt like routine dialogue would be in many games. There are strong and diverse environments. They're distinct from each other: the laboratory, the garden, the frog swamp, etc. I alluded to it in the mood, but the story here is also just great, and it's oddly relatable as well. It pulls you in again and again with its charm, and it drops crumbs from an underlying mystery at the perfect time to keep you involved. You're the protagonist, and you're just trying to get through the day. Another day at the office, keeping your nose clean, earning enough money to survive. Your goals shift, but it's always a mechanism of need, curiosity, and a way to get by, rather than become the hero you were meant to be. Pacing of the story is also pretty great. It intersperses itself rapidly, developing sub-stories in each environment, with an overall meta or game-wide story as well that's dealt out in smaller doses. Now, this is typically dealt out by bosses that you meet or by unlocking and exploring new areas in your office. The story also has quite a bit of meaning. It has some morals, it has social commentary, and it doesn't do it without, well, it does it without being intrusive. Like I said above, what would somebody do to live forever? It kind of explores that question. If you had the power to control that, what would your price be to do so? If an eternal life was granted, how would you react, or how would each individual react? There are a lot of reasons, scenarios, and fun things to explore here, and the game gives you answers for those things. So let's move on to the secrets and puzzles for the good side here. I think many of the puzzles are easy, especially those that are 100% required to progress the game. They do still manage to be fun and engaging though, without ever overstaying their welcome, which I appreciate. They're not tedious, they're not something that you grind through. In addition, there are further puzzles and secrets that are stored everywhere around the map. It makes exploration exceedingly rewarding and enjoyable in this game. Oh, did I just find a bush that I could walk through? What? A corner that changed the camera angle completely, an odd reflection in the floor that led me to a secret. These things are moments that are just kind of fun, and they pop out of nowhere for you. And if you're paying attention, if you're taking any time at all, you're going to get to experience a few of these things. It's not just puzzles either. You're going to be finding shortcut passages, shrines that give you additional mana or health or shiny things that in true Crow fashion, which I love from a theme perspective, both help illustrate a larger story and appear stored in and around your desk at the office as treasured knickknacks that you've just acquired from your adventure. Now, you're also going to be rewarded for returning to old locations, keeping you from just kind of forgetting about the old portion of the game as you gain new magical powers or solutions that can often solve old problems in a new way, unlocking new pathways, unlocking new areas of old places. The combat is also good for me. It's tried and true, but it's also quick, satisfying, and effective. The game doesn't give your crow the ability to block, so you inevitably develop this kind of rhythm of dodging and making quick strike or two and dodging back out. Bob and weave, float like a butterfly and whatnot, somewhat dancing with your opponents. Now, bosses and mini-bosses feel very satisfying to beat for me as well. I kind of describe the combat as Dark Souls Light or Dark Souls Easy, in that your health is very limited and they have distinct patterns to their attacks. If you haven't solved those patterns, you'll probably inevitably die, so they do pose a challenge, but unlike Dark Souls, your run back won't be that long, and it's not an all-consuming exercise from your game. I think we've said a lot of good things about Death's Door, but what's bad about Death's Door? Now, for me, the main issue with the game is that it doesn't really do anything new. It does what many other games do, with a lot of polish and its own unique style and feel. But ultimately, the gameplay, the mechanisms, the combat, then puzzles, is very similar to the Zelda games of old without actually being a Zelda game. It's Gothic Zelda or Emo Zelda or whatever it happens to be. Now, that's not a bad thing. Well, it's listed in the bad category, and I'm conflicted. We'll go with that. It also has environments that are occasionally confusing for me. If you die without becoming immediately familiar with an area, you might struggle to return, or when you go back to an area from the first part of the game to revisit a puzzle with new powers, etc., getting where you intend to do so is often a journey, even though they have a lot of mechanisms to make it easier, to make it faster. Minion variety is also pretty minimal for me. While they may look different throughout the game, the basic minions tend to be on the simple size. There's kind of a one-size-fits-all tactic to defeating them, often being kind of applicable across the board. And unfortunately, this ends up being a double-edged sword, as I found myself getting kind of lazy and running past or just slashing with wild abandon to the detriment of my own health bar sometimes. So, it's not like it's that easy. We'll move on to our channel focus, though. How does Death's Door treat your time? Areas in the game are what I would call substages or sub-levels. They're broken out quite a bit. Once they're completed, there's usually a switch, a puzzle, or a mechanism that unlocks a shortcut back to that particular location, which keeps you from backtracking and repeating too much of the content if you happen to die, which, based on the combat, is going to occur quite a few times. Now, I find that these are usually very well thought out. They make navigation much easier, but there are some final choke points in areas that had me making several longer walks of shame because of a particularly difficult fight. I can think of one in the frog swamp area that was maybe the longest run that I had made, and it's the one that I made the most frequently. The game itself is also actually quite short from an overall story perspective, so this kind of hits an efficiency. As you play, you're going to be constantly getting new information, story pieces at a rapid pace, which keeps it rewarding, and it never really lets the game settle into a lull. It's actually really a benefit for busy gamers in my opinion, but there are collections, secrets, and puzzles that exist outside of the main story for those who want to stretch out their experience. So it's not just a stretch, they also do feel rewarding in their own right, so even though I am done with the game, so to speak, to unlock the true ending, you'd need to complete all the shiny things and the seeds and things of that nature, and I'm still finding that enjoyable. I'm still finding that worth my time. It doesn't feel tedious. So I think they've done a very good job from an efficiency standpoint. So let's go ahead and move on to the final scores. So for me, overall, I give it an 8.5. I'm giving this game just an excellent score because of how well it blends nostalgia, storytelling, and gameplay. Both its puzzles and action-oriented combat really shine for me, and throughout the entire game without ever really bogging down. The only reason its score isn't higher for me is I feel I've seen too many similar games before. But in many ways, this game is a perfect example of the adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So Let's go ahead and give our ephemeral efficiency score here. This is going to be an 8 for me. It falls just short of the overall score, but it's an 8. It's very, very high for me, and it's higher than most of the other games that I've been rating so far. I give this a high score for a lot of the convenience that it has and very little to no elements of pointless exposition during the story or elements of grind throughout the game. The levels are small and overall well and concisely designed. Doors put you in and out of story elements and out of the action well enough and at convenient areas. The combat never lags, that you never feel like you're just running around. For me, the only things that negatively impact the efficiency score here are the occasional confusion or the ability to become lost in a loop. There are also a few in-game activities, such as finding and planting all of the seeds, that could become tedious for many players, and I want to take that into account as well. However, most players are either going to enjoy it or they're going to self-select out of it, and therefore everything will still be enjoyable for the players that continue to do so. So I think it's unfair to bring it down too far for those things. Now, that's going to be the end of my review here for Death's Door today. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so very much for sticking around. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. People like you are people who make this content worth doing. I hope it's helped you in some way, and I'll see you in the next video.